I stood there, radiant in my white gown, the New York skyline glittering behind the ballroom's glass walls. This was my day, my wedding to David, the man who had shown me what true family felt like. Then, a voice cut through the celebratory murmur, sharp as a broken shard of glass. My breath hitched. My heart, which had been soaring, plummeted straight into the icy depths of my past. It was David, my foster brother, standing at the edge of the reception hall with Eleanor and Richard, my former foster parents, by his side. They hadn't been invited, not by a long shot. Eleanor, with her forced smile, looked around as if evaluating the decor, completely ignoring the glares. Richard, as usual, seemed to shrink behind her, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. My husband, David, sensing my sudden tension, gripped my hand, his brows furrowed in concern. "Still the same old dreamer, Sophia?" Foster David sneered, his gaze raking over my carefully chosen dress, my meticulously styled blonde hair, my clear blue eyes that now burned with a fire he couldn't possibly comprehend. "Always reaching for things you can't have." The words echoed in the suddenly quiet room, a cruel echo from a past I had fought tooth and nail to escape. My vision blurred for a split second, the sting of his public humiliation a familiar ache. But then, something snapped. The hurt transmuted into pure, unadulterated resolve. Empty pockets? I almost laughed. Beneath the delicate lace of my gown, concealed in a small, elegant clutch, was a meticulously prepared document. It wasn't just paper, it was a detonation device. A legal brief, dense with irrefutable evidence, ready to expose every single one of their meticulously crafted lies. The sheer audacity of them crashing my wedding. They truly believed they held some power over me, that I was still the naive, discarded girl they threw out onto the streets. But they were wrong. So terribly, irrevocably wrong. My name is Sophia, and they were about to learn that the girl they stripped of everything had built an empire, piece by agonizing piece, just for this moment. This wasn't a wedding crashing. This was an ambush. And in my hands, hidden from plain sight, was the truth. The very truth that would unravel their entire tainted legacy, one thread at a time, until their world collapsed around them. But to understand the full weight of that moment, to truly grasp why this confrontation was inevitable, we have to go back, way back, to understand why their taunts hit so deep, why my resolve burned so fiercely. We need to peel back the layers of memory, back to the sterile house of Eleanor and Richard. Back to when I was just Sophia, a girl desperate for a place to belong. From the moment I arrived, a stark line was drawn between me and their biological son, David. My foster brother, not my husband David, of course. My David is everything he isn't. Foster David had a room filled with the latest toys, designer clothes, and a weekly allowance that could fund my entire month's bus fare. I, Sophia, slept on a pull-out couch in the study, wearing hand-me-downs that were often too big or too worn. Eleanor would praise David endlessly for simply existing, for breathing, for getting a mediocre grade on a school report. My brilliant David, she'd coo, ruffling his hair. Meanwhile, I would present her with perfect report cards, meticulously clean the house, and cook dinner. My efforts were met with a dismissive nod, if anything. She would ask, her eyes scanning the floor for imaginary dust. Richard, when he bothered to notice, was no better. He'd hand David crisp bills for a new video game, while I was told to earn my keep by scrubbing the bathroom floors. I remember overhearing him tell a relative, "Sophia is a sweet girl, but a bit of a dreamer." Grounded, I learned, meant kept in her place. Despite the constant slights, the blatant favoritism, I clung to a foolish hope. I believed that if I worked harder, if I was always polite, always helpful, always excelling, they would eventually see my worth. They would see Sophia not just a ward. I believed they would love me. I thought if I just tried harder, they would finally see me, truly see Sophia. But then, the day came when everything shattered. I was 16, my world a fragile construct of borrowed clothes and whispered dreams. My escape plan was a scholarship to a small, prestigious art college upstate, a haven I discovered in the library, tucked away in brochures. I poured every ounce of my being into the application, crafting essays late into the night, fueled by lukewarm instant coffee. Sophia, I thought, you are going to make it. You are going to be free. One afternoon, Eleanor found my application forms tucked beneath my pillow. Her blue eyes, usually so cold, now sparkled with a terrifying amusement. She held up my meticulously written essay, a testament to my hopes and fears, and began to read it aloud, her voice dripping with mockery. Sophia believes her vibrant inner world can change the world, she recited, punctuating each phrase with a condescending chuckle. The humiliation was scalding. It wasn't just my dream she was tearing apart, it was me. They had never once acknowledged my creativity, my drive, my yearning for a life beyond their sterile walls. Now they were publicly, at least, within the confines of our supposedly private home, which always felt like a stage, dismantling the very core of who I was. Eleanor finally sneered, tossing the crumpled essay onto my bed. Sophia, be realistic. We have no intention of funding your delusions. And frankly, we've decided we've done enough. You're 16 now. Richard nodded, his face impassive. Consider yourself emancipated, Sophia. You have exactly 1 hour to pack whatever you can carry. Don't worry about leaving a forwarding address. My heart stopped. Emancipated. That was their word for cast out, discarded, thrown away. I remember the cold dread that washed over me, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like every carefully constructed brick of my future had just been kicked out from under me. In that moment, standing in the doorway of the room that was never truly mine, my vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg, but no sound came. Only a chilling numbness. My entire existence reduced to a handful of items. I walked out of their house, not looking back. The front door clicked shut behind me with a sickening finality. It was late afternoon, the sun already dipping low, casting long, mocking shadows. The world, which had seemed so full of possibility just moments before, now stretched out before me, vast and indifferent. I was Sophia, 16, with nowhere to go and nothing but the clothes on my back and a crushing sense of betrayal. The next few weeks were a blur of concrete and cold. I learned to sleep on park benches, to make a $1 stretch across 3 meals, to read in libraries until closing, just for the warmth and the illusion of safety. My only companions were the characters in my books and the gnawing emptiness in my stomach. Every whispered insult, every dismissive glance from Eleanor and Richard now echoed in my mind, amplified by the harsh reality of my new existence. Dreamer with empty pockets. Foster David's words from my wedding day felt like a premonition, a curse they had cast on me years ago. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. The grand dreams I'd nurtured felt like foolish fantasies now. My parents, long gone, were just a distant memory, a vague comfort I clung to, but no real help. I was just Sophia, a forgotten orphan on the streets of a city that didn't care. One particularly bitter evening, huddled in a corner of the city bus terminal, trying to block out the harsh fluorescent lights and the even harsher reality, I thought about giving up. I was cold, hungry, and bone-weary. What was the point? Why keep fighting when every path led to this desolate end? Just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, a hand gently tapped my shoulder. I flinched, my heart pounding. A kind-faced security guard stood over me, holding a thick cream-colored envelope. "Hey, kid," he said softly, "you dropped this." I stared at the envelope. I hadn't dropped anything. It was sealed, addressed to Sophia Anderson, in an elegant, unfamiliar script. My name. The one my parents had given me. A name I hadn't heard in years, replaced by the generic Sophia the foster parents had used. My hands trembled as I took it, a sudden flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Curiosity. It was a formal-looking letter, bearing a return address from a law firm I'd never heard of. My heart pounded a rhythm against my ribs, a strange mix of fear and an inexplicable, nascent hope. I opened the envelope, my fingers fumbling with the thick paper. My eyes scanned the first few lines, my breath catching in my throat. It was addressed to me, Sophia Anderson, concerning the estate of my biological parents. My parents. A pang of raw grief, mingled with a new, urgent curiosity, pierced through me. I read on, each word slowly reshaping my world. The letter detailed a substantial trust fund, established for me, Sophia Anderson, by my loving parents before their untimely deaths. It was to be managed by designated trustees and released in full upon my 18th birthday. My heart hammered against my ribs. 18. That was 2 years from now. But the next paragraph made my blood run cold. It outlined the terms. A generous monthly allowance was to be paid to my legal guardians, Eleanor and Richard, for my care, education, and well-being. Regular reports were to be submitted, detailing how these funds were being utilized. A dark, icy wave washed over me. Payments for my care? While I was sleeping on a pull-out couch, wearing hand-me-downs, earning my keep by scrubbing floors? While David, their biological son, flaunted his new toys and designer clothes? Every dismissive nod, every cutting remark, every act of blatant favoritism flashed through my mind, now imbued with a sickening new meaning. It wasn't just indifference. It wasn't just them being cruel or unloving. They were being paid for my existence. They were being paid a substantial sum to give me a loving home, an education, a future. And they had taken every single penny, pocketing it while I was starved, both emotionally and physically. They had not only betrayed my trust, but had actively stolen from me, systematically, month after month, year after year. The dreamer with empty pockets, taunt from Foster, David echoed in my ears, no longer a random insult but a calculated jab. They wanted me to believe I was worthless, that I deserved nothing, precisely because they were siphoning off everything that was rightfully mine. They weren't just neglecting me, they were orchestrating my poverty. They weren't just ungrateful, they were criminals. My hands clenched, the letter crinkling in my grasp. The tears I'd refused to shed for weeks, for months, for years, finally spilled over, but these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. My quiet hope for a loving family, my foolish belief that I could earn their affection, had been a cruel joke. They had used me, exploited me, then discarded me when I was about to become an inconvenient paper trail. In that cramped, cold bus terminal, the despair that had threatened to consume me vanished, replaced by a searing clarity. This wasn't about me proving my worth to them anymore. This wasn't about a heartbroken orphan seeking revenge for emotional abuse. This was about justice. This was about exposing a calculated, years-long fraud. Eleanor and Richard weren't just bad foster parents. They were thieves. My trembling hands clutched the letter from Sterling and Chambers. It was a lifeline, a flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness. I knew I had to go to them. I had to tell them everything. With newfound determination, fueled by a scorching rage, I found a public phone and dialed the number on the letterhead, my voice raspy from disuse and tears. A kind-sounding receptionist answered. I explained, haltingly, that I was Sophia Anderson, and I needed to speak to someone about my parents' trust. The urgency in my voice must have been apparent. Within minutes, I was connected to Mr. Jonathan Sterling himself, a senior partner whose name graced the firm's letterhead. Mr. Sterling listened patiently as I poured out my story, the words tumbling out like a torrent. I told him about Eleanor and Richard, about the hand-me-downs, the chores, the hunger, the eviction. I watched his face, a seasoned lawyer's mask, slowly crack into disbelief, then anger. He asked for the letter, then for proof of my identity. I showed him my old school ID, my birth certificate, which I had miraculously kept. Sophia, he said, his voice firm but gentle, what they have done is a grave injustice. His words were a balm to my soul, validating every suspicion, every painful memory. He arranged for me to stay in a temporary apartment, assuring me that the initial expenses would be covered by the trust, money that was always rightfully mine. He promised to help me reclaim what was stolen. Under Mr. Sterling's guidance, a fierce legal battle began to take shape. He introduced me to Sarah Chen, a brilliant young associate who specialized in trust and estate law. Together, they meticulously gathered evidence, Bank statements, school records, my own sparse medical records from those years. They found the receipts for the monthly payments made to Eleanor and Richard, payments that mysteriously never translated into any meaningful support for me. I spent countless hours with Sarah, recounting every detail, every slight, every moment of neglect. It was painful, revisiting those memories, but with each recollection, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was a witness, a claimant, an avenger. I was Sophia Anderson, and I was going to make them pay. Sometimes, late at night in my small, safe apartment, I'd look at the only picture I had of my biological parents, a faded snapshot of them laughing, holding me as a baby. My mother, Maria, had such kind eyes, and my father, Robert, a comforting smile. I remembered the scent of my mother's perfume, the warmth of my father's hand. They had created this trust, not just as money, but as a shield, a promise of protection they couldn't physically provide. They wanted me to have a life of opportunity, to be safe, to pursue my dreams. Eleanor and Richard had desecrated that sacred intention. Their betrayal wasn't just against me. It was against the memory of my loving parents. This fight wasn't just for me. It was for them too, for the justice their love deserved. Months turned into a year. I enrolled in night classes, studying with a ferocity born of defiance. Mr. Sterling and Sarah built a watertight case. They identified every transaction, every fraudulent report Eleanor and Richard had submitted. The numbers were staggering, a testament to their greed. We had documented everything. The meeting was set for next Tuesday, in a conference room at Sterling and Chambers. Eleanor and Richard had been summoned under the pretense of reviewing the trust fund's current status. A routine meeting, they were told. They were walking into a meticulously laid trap, a legal ambush. All the pieces were now in place. My proof, my lawyers, my unwavering will. I had faced down despair, fought for survival, and now I was ready to walk into the lion's den. The polished door of the conference room felt heavy in my hand. I pushed it open, stepping into a world I had meticulously orchestrated. Eleanor and Richard sat at the long mahogany table, flanked by David, their biological son, all looking smug and faintly annoyed by the summons. Mr. Sterling and Sarah Chen were already there, their faces impassive. Eleanor offered a brittle, forced smile. "Sarah, darling, we were so worried when you just ran off. What a relief to see you looking, well, you look well." Richard nodded, a patronizing smirk playing on his lips. "Yes, Sarah. Always chasing these silly little meetings, aren't you?" Then David, my foster brother, chuckled, leaning back in his chair. He looked me up and down, a familiar sneer twisting his features. "Still chasing dreams, Sarah? Or did you finally find some pockets to fill?" I walked to the head of the table, not a tremor in my step, and sat opposite them. My eyes met David's, holding his gaze until his smugness wavered. "My name is Sophia Anderson," I corrected him, my voice calm, clear, and steady. "And I have finally filled my pockets, David." Eleanor scoffed. "Oh, please, Sarah. Always so dramatic. Let's just get this over with, shall we? Mr. Sterling, can we discuss the usual allowances?" She reached for a plate of cookies, oblivious. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, pushing a stack of neatly bound documents across the table. "Eleanor, Richard, this isn't about allowances." The color drained from Eleanor's face. Richard's hand twitched, knocking over a glass of water that Sarah quickly moved to contain. David's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then alarm. Richard stammered, his voice losing its arrogant edge. "What investigation?" I leaned forward, my hands resting on the cool wood of the table. "It's an investigation into the hundreds of thousands of dollars you systematically embezzled from my trust fund, Richard." I watched their faces contort with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. Eleanor shrieked, finding her voice. "We cared for you, Sarah. We gave you a home." "You called me a dreamer with empty pockets, David," I reiterated. My eyes fixed on him, my voice a quiet steel. You, Eleanor and Richard ensured those pockets stayed empty while you gorged yourselves on the inheritance my parents intended for my well-being. You didn't give me a home. You gave me a cage and charged my parents for the privilege. Mr. Sterling gestured to Sarah Chen, who began to calmly lay out bank statements, forged receipts, and meticulous financial reports across the table. Each document was a nail in their coffin. Here are the records of the trust fund's disbursements, Sarah stated, her voice dispassionate. And here are the corresponding expenditures from your accounts, Eleanor and Richard. Our forensic accounting clearly shows substantial funds diverted for personal luxuries. Your new car, David's private school tuition, Eleanor's designer clothes, Richard's golf club membership. Eleanor began to sob, a theatrical, desperate sound. Sophia, please. You don't understand. We were struggling. We loved you like our own. It was just a temporary borrowing. Richard, pale and sweating, tried to regain some composure. Yes, Sarah. Think of the family. We raised you. Don't let these lawyers turn you against us. We can work this out privately. I met his gaze, my eyes cold. You discarded me on the streets at 16, Richard. You stole my childhood, my inheritance, and my trust. You had no intention of paying it back. But Sophia, David interjected, his voice trembling now. We're family. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. Family? You used that word to justify your cruelty, to manipulate me into believing I deserved nothing. My real parents, Maria and Robert, entrusted you with a sacred duty and you desecrated it. I picked up the final document, a single sheet of paper with official letterhead. This isn't a negotiation, Eleanor. This isn't a family discussion, Richard. This is the end. The papers have already been filed. The media is being notified. Eleanor's theatrical sobs turned into genuine ragged gasps. Her face, once carefully composed, crumpled into a mask of pure terror. Richard's bravado completely evaporated, replaced by a desperate animalistic fear in his eyes. He lunged across the table, his hand outstretched as if to snatch the document from my grasp. Mr. Sterling, ever the professional, subtly blocked his path, his gaze unwavering. Mr. Cunningham, I advise you to remain seated. David, my foster brother, looked utterly bewildered, his earlier sneer replaced by a pathetic confusion. He glanced from his parents to me, then to the piles of damning evidence. What have you done, Sophia? He stammered, his voice thin and reedy. I held up the document, letting them see the official seal. It is very real, David. Every single word. You called me a dreamer with empty pockets. You were right about the dreamer part. My voice was calm, almost detached, despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about resolution. Eleanor wailed, Please, Sarah. My beautiful Sophia. Don't do this. We can still be a family. Richard dropped back into his chair, defeat etched onto every line of his face. He buried his head in his hands. Your reputation was built on deceit, Richard. Your business was funded by theft, I countered, my voice steady. As for family, Eleanor, you severed those ties the day you threw a 16-year-old girl onto the street. I paused, allowing the weight of my words to sink in. I am not here for revenge, not truly. I am here for justice. For myself and for the memory of Maria and Robert. Sarah Chen stepped forward, placing a final thick folder in front of them. These are the copies of the civil lawsuit, the criminal charges, and the official statements sent to the regulatory bodies and press outlets. Your attorneys have already been notified. Richard looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Sophia, if you just drop this, we can make it right. We can give you back a portion, maybe even all of it. I shook my head slowly, definitively. You had years to make it right. Years to return what was mine. Years to show me a shred of human decency. You chose not to. So no, Richard. There is no going back. David pleaded, finally finding his voice, though it cracked with desperation. I asked, my gaze unwavering, What about the little girl whose life you all meticulously dismantled? This isn't about me destroying you. I do, in a way, forgive you, I said, a chilling calm in my tone. I forgive you for the pain, for the fear, for the loneliness. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry that burden of hatred any longer. It ends here. I will not be defined by your cruelty. Sterling stood up, a clear signal that the meeting was over. Eleanor, Richard, David, our firm considers this matter closed. Eleanor let out another sob, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape that wasn't there. Richard slowly pushed himself up, leaning heavily on the table. David, bewildered, followed his parents, not daring to meet my gaze. They shuffled out of the conference room, leaving behind only the chilling silence and the overwhelming scent of defeat. I watched them go, not with triumph, but with a profound sense of closure. The weight I had carried for so long, the burning desire for vindication, finally lifted. It wasn't the kind of relief I had imagined, no burst of joy, but a deep, quiet peace. I had come into this room as Sophia Anderson, a woman who had meticulously built an empire from the ashes of her stolen youth. I walked out the same woman, but one unburdened by the ghosts of a past that had tried to claim her. Some people believe that justice is about evening the score, about making others feel the pain they inflicted. But I learned that true justice isn't about their suffering. It's about your own liberation. It's about reclaiming your narrative, rebuilding what was broken, and living a life so full, so authentic, that the shadows of the past can no longer touch you. My pockets were full now, not just with justice, but with the boundless possibilities of a future I had earned, brick by painful brick. And to anyone who has ever been told they are just a dreamer with empty pockets, remember this: those pockets are waiting to be filled, not with the gold of revenge, but with the priceless currency of your own resilience, your own success, and your own unbreakable spirit.